Hello and welcome back to the shop. So as the title suggests, this is going to be about putting together a basic toolkit for your home shop if you're just starting out. Now you guys out there that are in industry, that are apprentices, you guys already know what you need, and a lot of your stuff may be job specific, so this may or may not be the video for you. Now, this isn't what you need to get started. You're not going to need all this stuff to actually start making parts on the lathe. This is putting together a toolkit that will get you through probably a good 80% of the parts that you're going to want to make and measurements that you're going to need to take and things you're going to have on hand. This will get you through a lot of that. Alright, so this is a very good starting toolbox to strive for, but by no means do you have to have every single piece that I'm showing you to be able to make a part on the lathe. In all honesty, all you need to start using the lathe is a work holding device like a chuck, a tool bit with the proper geometry, a tool post to put the tool bit in, and a piece of stock to turn. Then you can start making round objects smaller. As far as the measurement side goes, the only thing you really need at first to make relatively accurate parts is a pair of dial calipers. If you have to go on beyond the relatively accurate parts, this is where you want to have a nice toolkit to go with you. So before we even get started, I'm going to address one thing right now. Brands. Okay? I have brand loyalty to things. There's certain brands I like for certain things and certain brands I don't like for certain things. But I'll tell you one thing. Do yourself a favor and buy the best tool that you can afford. Okay? If you can afford all Starrett tools or all Tutorial tools, more power to you, go out and do that. Most of us can't do that. So if you have to go out and buy a Harbor Freight version of whatever I'm showing you to start, perfectly acceptable. They'll get you the measurement, they'll get you by to do what you want. They're not going to be the nicest tools to use. They're going to feel gritty, they're going to feel kind of crappy, they may end up breaking and falling apart. But you know what? They'll get you by. That's how I started out. Okay? Now, this video also is I'm not gonna really go into cutting tools that you're gonna need. Just quickly off the top of your head, you're gonna need some tool blanks for the size lathe you have. So for my 9-inch tool blanks, lathe tool bit blanks from up to 3/8 of an inch. So that'll be 1/4 inch, 5/16 and 3/8. 115 piece drill bit set. The one that has was it 1/64 to 1/2 inch by 64 steps, number and letter, and a tap and die set, preferably one of the ones that goes up to 1/2 inch in fine and coarse, and that'll get you through a lot of stuff. Now, again, this is a beginner toolkit. On one hand we have Norm Abrams here that has every tool and machine known to man, and then on the other hand here we have Roy Underhill that has a hammer and a stick. They're both carpenters, they both make furniture, they both make stuff like that. We want to strive somewhere in the middle of that. We want a happy medium. So all this stuff here is going to get you through a lot of what you're going to see. It is by no means 100% definitive, but it is a very, very good start. And as I've said before, and I can't state this enough, this does not mean that you have to go out right away and buy all this stuff right away. These things I've collected over the years. I didn't buy them all at once, but these are the things you want to buy first. Some of the things I'm going to show you might be a little bit frivolous, but they'll pay for themselves in ease of use. And I'll point those out. They're not 100% required, but they're very, very good to have and an absolute worthwhile investment. So right now I'm going to answer that phone and then we'll go show you some stuff. Okay, so if you're starting off with high-speed steel, which I highly suggest you do, it's going to make your life a lot easier. You're going to need a way to grind them. So you're going to need a bench grinder. So these are the blanks right here. These are the sizes I use. So this is 1/4 inch, 5/16 and 3/8. As far as grinders go, you're not going to need one of those super fancy tool grinders with the angled plates and the coolant things, but you know what, if you can afford one and you want one, more power to you. All you really need is a basic grinder. Okay, so I highly suggest you forgo the Harbor Freight versions of them. If you look at the tool rests on the Harbor Freight ones, they're really, really chintzy. It's just a piece of stamped sheet metal. Any grinder that you want to look at the tool rests and get the beefiest one that you can. You can see this one here, they're cast aluminum, and there's pretty much a twin of this minus the groove on this side, but I was able to bolt a large piece of 1/4-inch steel to it to allow for me to have a large table to be able to easily grind. I also highly suggest you go with an 8-inch version, 8-inch bench grinder rather than a 6-inch. Reason being is there are a lot better selection of 8-inch wheels around than 6-inch wheels. Now these are still the original ones that are on here, but you can go and get better ones. This is a very good grinder to start off with, this little Ryobi here, and I'll tell you why. This sucker's cheap, it works, and it has all the features you need. Okay, this is still available from Home Depot. The only difference between it and this one, which is about 5 years old, is the new ones are that ugly Ryobi green rather than this blue and gold. 70 bucks. Okay. The only thing that sucks about this, coolant tray is garbage, but then pretty much they all are, and this doesn't have any kind of provision for a vacuum port for dust collection. But it has the guards. It also, this one has a magnifier on there, and it also has built-in lights. Plenty powerful to do what you want. I suggest if you are in the market for a cheap bench grinder, something not super fancy, check out these Ryobi ones. Won't let you down. Okay, so as far as lathe tooling for the machine itself, you're going to need a work holding device of some sort. If you already have a chuck, fine. If you do not have a chuck, I highly suggest your first chuck be a 4-jaw chuck. Reason being is a 4-jaw chuck, a 4-jaw independent chuck, is way more versatile than a 3-jaw chuck. You can do offset work in it, and you can also dial your parts in, so you can take it out of the chuck, do another operation and put it back in and dial it in and get it perfectly concentric again. Also, if you're buying a chuck, a used chuck, or if you have a 3-jaw chuck, usually they're pretty worn out, okay? So they have varying degrees of wear, and whereas a normal brand new chuck will give you about 3 thousandths run out, it only gets worse as it wears, okay? A 4-jaw chuck, even a used one, it's a lot easier to get around wear because you're manually adjusting the jaws and adjusting the position of the part. And you can kind of make up, as long as the jaws themselves are relatively crisp, you can kind of make up for a lot of that wear in the screws and things like that. So if you don't have a chuck, your first one should definitely be a 4-jaw. Even if you have only a 3-jaw chuck, down the road, a worthwhile investment is a 4-jaw chuck. You're also going to need some tailstock tooling, okay? You're going to need a tailstock center. I suggest you get a live center, meaning that this center rotates with the work, okay? This has a ball bearing in it. You can get dead centers, which just means that this is all one solid piece. The work turns around the center, but you build up friction and everything else on the point. So get yourself a live center. These are also pretty cheap. You're also going to need a tailstock drill chuck, okay? So get yourself just a regular 1/2-inch capacity keyed drill chuck for your tailstock, okay? The reason why you want a keyed one is because a keyless one, those tighten down by varying torque. When the bit starts to spin, they'll tighten down. So if you use reduced shank tooling in there, reduced shank drills, you actually have a chance of over tightening that chuck and either destroying the jaws or actually locking the chuck up and not being able to get the bit out, okay? Now, for my lathe at least, a 1/2-inch is really good. I do have a 5/8, but that's a 5/8 capacity chuck. So you see the size difference here, and I only have a 9-inch lathe. So this is really, really big and gets in the way, but this will do about 90% of your work. As a luxury item, you can get an Albrecht style chuck here. If you do get an Albrecht, they're very, very expensive. It's kind of a luxury item. You know, I would rather have a keyed chuck in the lathe rather than a keyless chuck in the lathe. You're also going to need a tool post. Most lathes are going to come with one, especially if you buy older lathes. They're going to come with the lantern style tool post. Perfectly acceptable. They work perfectly fine. Have these little Loris holders. They're a little wonky to use at first, but you'll get used to them, and they work perfectly fine. Now, an upgrade from here, and a worthwhile investment, is going to be a quick change tool post. This is no Loris style. This is a knockoff, okay? The Loris ones are ridiculously expensive, even used. If you're going for the regular knockoff ones, I suggest two things. Get yourself a wedge style, not a pin style. And also, don't go for the no-name ones. There's two major types of imported chucks, alright? Or imported tool posts. There's the no-name brand, which has no name, just says China on it. And then the name brand China, which is Phase 2. I highly suggest you go with the Phase 2 one. The build quality is much better. And the build quality on the tool holders is much better than the regular no-name ones. Okay, and this is a very, very worthwhile system. You have tool holders that you preset to center height, and then whenever you want one, all you do is drop it in and lock on, and then you can keep changing out all different tools right at a time. Makes life a hell of a lot easier. You can get by with the lantern one, which is perfectly fine, but definitely a worthwhile investment. So that's pretty much your basic tooling package for your lathe. Let's go over to the bench and look at some basic measuring tools that you're going to want to have in your toolkit. Okay, so as far as measuring tools, first, the most basic of measuring tools, get yourself a 6-inch rule. Alright, 6-inch scale. This is a, what is it? I think it's a 5R. Is it a 5R or 4? Yeah, 5R. So this is calibrated in tenths, 100ths, and on the other side, 32nds and 64ths. That's the type of layout I prefer, but they have many. This serves multiple purposes. Use to scrape stuff. Use it as a quick little parallel guide to get something on there. You use it to stir your coffee, and occasionally use it to actually measure things. But definitely something to have around. Now, your most basic of measuring tools, the thing that you're going to go to 90% of the time, is going to be your dial calipers, or calipers in general, okay? I have a few versions here. You can see this one is a dial caliper without the thumb wheel. This one over here is a dial caliper with a thumbnail. And this is a digital one. I personally prefer the dial ones. I prefer the Brown and Sharp ones. Are my favorite ones to use. I prefer these over the digital ones because of the simple fact that as these don't run out of batteries. The one good thing about the digital ones is that you can do imperial and metric measurements with them, switch back and forth with this little button here. Now, if you want to go on the cheap side of a digital one, check these ones out from Frankfurt Arsenal. Keith Fenner turned me on to these. They're really, really smooth for being so cheap. They're sub 20 bucks. Or 21 bucks or 25 bucks, somewhere around that line. They're really smooth for the price. And also they have in there is the pinout. If you guys are electronics geniuses, you can actually make a remote display for these and use these for DROs. And they don't eat batteries as much as Harbor Freight ones do, and they don't feel like they have sand in them like the Harbor Freight ones do. I highly suggest you go with one of those two versions as the dial and the digital, and stay away from vernier. Stay away from these ones. Okay, these are nice to have to look at, and some people do use them a lot, and they're nice to play with, and they're good because they're relatively cheaper for the bigger ones, at least used. But stay away from these ones. Now, if you're gonna need something a little more accurate than the dial calipers, and that's where your micrometers come in. Okay, so start out with, they're in 1-inch increments. So you have a 1-inch mic, a 2-inch mic, a 3-inch mic, a 4-inch mic. So this one is 0 to 1. The next one up is 1-inch, 2-inch. Next one up, 3-inch, a 4-inch, etc. I have up to 6-inch in my shop, but obviously start out with a 1-inch. Depending on the size of parts that you're going to make, is gonna dictate how far up you have to go in the micrometers. But definitely start out with a 1-inch, and probably a 2-inch would cover 95% of your needs in the home shop environment. I personally prefer the Brown & Sharps over the Starretts. And these ones, they also come in digital, but actually the battery and these are dead. Again, I prefer the analog over the digital due to the fact that, you know, these don't have batteries. Now, if you want to know how to read these micrometers and the dial calipers and all these measuring tools, have a look up here and down below in the description, and there are a couple of videos there that show you how to actually read those. Okay, so especially if you have a 4-jaw chuck, you're going to want a 1-inch travel dial indicator. This is going to be a general indicator for the shop. It's going to be 90% of your uses. You're going to want, there are different configurations of these. You can see this one goes from 0 to 100. There are ones that go from 0 to 50 and then 0 to 50 on this side. You want one that's 0 to 100 like this and has a 1-inch travel. And this is going to allow you to dial in your 4-jaw chuck and check run out of your parts. So you're going to want a regular plunger dial indicator and not a dial test indicator like this, okay? You don't want one of these. And again, you can get these for like 12 bucks from Harbor Freight. This is a nice Starrett one. One of the biggest differences, maybe you can hear it. You can hear the mechanism side. Okay, it sounds nice and smooth, and it feels nice and smooth. This is an import one. You can hear that hiss. It's not sticky, but it's definitely not as smooth as the Starrett, and that hiss is it rubbing up against the barrels and things like that. So this is definitely a much better one, but again, the little Harbor Freight ones work. Now you're going to want something to hold this on your lathe to use it. You're going to need something to hold this steady. Now you can rig up and make your own that hangs off your tool post to hold it on the tool post and on center, or you can use a mag base. So this is the one that you'd get from Harbor Freight, right? And it works great, works perfectly fine. It'll allow you to magnetically clamp it to your bed of your lathe, move this around and get it to get your indicator to touch your part. A step up from that is a Noga. Now this is probably a good $100 more than the other one, but one knob, quarter turn. This gets all loosey-goosey, and you can turn it any which way you want, and then quarter turn, tighten that sucker up, and it doesn't move. Also with dial indicator, with these dial indicators, you can get one of these, okay, which effectively turns your outside indicator here. This clamps on like this. Now you can use this section here, and you can get into bores, and effectively turns your dial indicator into a dial test indicator, more or less. Okay, it's great for indicating bores in on your 4-jaw chuck, and it's a lot cheaper than buying 2 indicators. Now if you're doing threading on your lathe, you're going to need one of these, especially if you're hand grinding your own tool bits. So this is a 60-degree thread gauge. So these notches here, right, will allow you to get your 60-degree geometry on your tool bit, so you grind it and check it against this. This, if you put this piece up against your piece of work and you fit your tool bit in here perfectly, that's how you get your tool perpendicular to your work to be able to cut the thread. Now when you buy one of these, buy a good one because they're cheap. These are only like 10 bucks. This is a Brown & Sharp, but buy one that has all this information, the double depth of thread stamped in the front, because you're going to need those numbers when you thread. You're going to want to use those numbers as a guide. Also, if you're threading, you're going to need to know what thread you have to cut, so you're going to need thread gauges, okay? So get the one with this like 80 or 60 leaves or something like that. This is an SPI 14-034-3. Okay, this is going to cover 90% of the pitches you're going to come across, imperial pitches. Get any one that you want, just make sure the ones that you get have the actual pitches stamped, physically engraved into the leaves, and not just stamped with ink, because that ink will wear off. Okay, so you're going to need one of those. Okay, so that's my idea of a basic toolkit to have around the shop. Now, that'll cover most of your needs. Now, this is by no means the end-all, be-all of tools. You're going to need a lot more, and you're going to want a lot more than this. I failed to mention some pretty useful items, such as telescoping gauges, dial test indicators, thread measuring wires for measuring threads. But those are useless to you unless you have this basic set of tools, okay? It's like those pin gauges that are sitting back there. I love those. I use those. Those are great. Love them. Saves time. Awesome. But those are companion tools to this set of basic tools right here. Now, that doesn't mean that if you don't have all these, you have to go and right out and buy all these. I tried to set up this video and film it in rank of importance. So the first tools you saw are more important than the tools you saw at the end. If any of you guys out there, have something to add, by all means add it into the comments. Say this is a really good thing to have, but as far as basics, these are something that everybody should have. I hope that points some of you guys in the right direction, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and we'll see you on the next one.